Well, hello everyone, and you join us here today to have a bit of a conversation. As usual, Tom and I are quite sick of each other, so we've thrown someone else into the mix. We've brought in Mike France from Christopher Ward, and we're going to talk Bel Canto. Hello Mike, how are you doing?
I'm really well, thank you Andrew, and thank you Tom. Thanks for the invitation.
Great to speak to you.
Yeah, and we've had a few conversations over the past few months, haven't we, around a particular kind of watch that has done incredibly well.
We have.
But for the juice of anticipation for the people listening, what I want to do first is to talk about some of the past, because today didn't come out of nowhere. Christopher Ward, Mike France, how did those two things end up being in the same place at the same time?
Good question. The story really starts in April of 2004. My other co-founder, Peter Ellis, who's still in the business, and I had just sold the Early Learning Centre, which, for those people who don't know, was a quite large educational toy business. And
the Early Learning Centre.
The Early Learning Centre, yes.
Oh my goodness, I had no idea.
The British institution.
That is.
Yeah, British institution, yes. So we'd sold that to a chap called Tim Waterston, he of Waterston Books.
Wow, there's some big names of British retail flying around here.
Yeah, there you go. I've just come back from Barbados, but I went to Barbados after selling Early Learning Centre, and I haven't been there since 2004. By the way, that's just a vicious rumour.
You've been too busy since then.
And I have a view that we're here on this planet to be as productive as possible, and so there's only so much lying on a beach you can do. And although literally Peter and I was in my, he's a bit older than me, he won't like me telling you that, but I was in my late 40s, didn't need to work again really, but that was never going to be an option. And after about 4 weeks of twiddling thumbs, wanted to get back on the horse. So which horse and which race was I going to ride in? That was the big question really. Yeah. At Early Learning Centre, we'd established a pretty large online business. They told us we would never be able to sell climbing frames online. Well, we disproved that theory. So when they told me you'll never ever sell a watch online, that was a red rag to a bull. And so, having done some quite detailed and fortunate research into the watch market, a market we knew nothing about, by the way, and knew nothing about watches at all, apart from kind of liked watches, but had no depth of knowledge. I wasn't what you'd call a serious collector of watches. I just sort of always had an interest in watches, more from an aesthetic perspective, to be honest. I was one of these people who would think about the watch he was wearing in terms of the situation he found himself in, the clothes he was wearing. That may be my part, because before I owned the Early Learning Centre, I was in buying in various fashion businesses and brands, so I've always been interested. Product has always been something at my core of being, if you will. So the combination of wanted to have an online business, wanted to do something, you should always try and do something that you really are interested in doing. Watches seemed like an interesting arena. The more we researched into it, frankly, the more interested we became, just because
it's just a minefield of opportunity because it's such an old-fashioned business, right?
It is. It has some very traditional values. Let's put it that way. And
there was no one selling watches online in 2004. Is that what it was?
There was nobody selling watches online in 2004. So that seemed like an opportunity. And then the other thing we discovered was that, and I was really shocked to find this, that we could actually access the same componentry that the big boys were using. We initially started off by having the watches assembled in China and using Swiss-made movements from ETA and then Solita. ETA, as you will know, around 2007, 2008, sort of decided they weren't going to sell any Swiss-made movements to China, so that meant we had a problem. Then they decided they weren't going to sell any movements at all to third parties, which never really happened. But that was interesting. So we had this decision to make about whether or not we decided to ditch the Swiss aspect and go, let's say, go Myota, for instance, and keep the production in China. But we did feel, and still feel today, that we wanted somewhere in all of this, there was a perception, somewhat justified, sometimes not completely justified in my view, that Swiss is best in terms of watchmaking. I'm a great fan of Seiko, Grand Seiko, and many other watch brands and countries of origin. But the expertise that we felt was embedded in the Swiss industry was something that we wanted to tap into. So we literally, got in a car, went to Switzerland, drove around for weeks, talking to people, talking our way into Swiss watch factories.
Did you put on a high vis and hold a clipboard and just get let in? Was it that kind of
situation? I just think we were a curiosity. Who are these English idiots who are trying to sell watches online and are talking about having this amazing business? I mean, some of the ideas we had, quite frankly, were ludicrous as I look back. Back in the 80s and the 90s, I was very involved. At the time, I was the buying and merchandising director of British Home Stores. This was when it was successful, and before Philip got a hold of it. And so I'd been very embedded in and interested in quick response, and also had developed a number of theories, working with people like Kurt Salmon Associates, a major consultant in supply chain at the time, on how you could take the fear away from suppliers so that they invested time and energy in your brand and your business and your products. Because largely, fear of a buyer ditching them after one season or a price hike led to lots of insurances being put in a supply chain. Insurance is ultimately time, which is why lead times were so long. And we, working with some Americans as well, we created at the time something that not very originally I call the G7, where ultimately I had 7 large suppliers who were supplying BHS working together. And I'm talking people like Cortels, big companies, at the time, working together, sharing information on behalf of BHS, trying to reduce lead times. And my commitment to them was I would de-risk it. I was interested in long-term relationships. I was prepared to contract that. And so we made huge strides in terms of reducing lead times in clothing. Anyway, and getting people invested seriously in creating wonderful product for us. That seems like an aside, but actually it's also, I think, something that I learned then that certainly worked for us at Early Learning Centre. We took over Early Learning Centre when we didn't create it, and it had been this, as you described it, an English retail institution. It was also one of the most powerful brands in the UK. At the time we took it over, it was considered the 3rd most trusted brand in the UK after Marks and Spencer and Boots. And yet it had fallen on really parlous times. And it had fallen on parlous times because the previous management hadn't really known why it was so successful. It had just been really very successful. And when things start going wrong, i.e. Toys R Us turn up on your doorstep, if you don't know what's been making it work properly, you certainly don't know what levers to pull to turn it around. So John Menzies, who owned Early Learning Centre at that time, they fired the management team and invited me to come and try and turn it around for them, which I was very happy to do. And we completely recreated the supply chain, reinvested in product, and I was, delighted. Peter and I were delighted that it was a huge success. We ultimately bought it out of John Menzies, backed by 3i, and we took it from sort of heading towards losing 50 million to making 15 million profit in 7 years. So it was a big turnaround. Sold it, as I say, but those sort of philosophies that we developed over the course of our careers, we brought to some extent, into this tiny fledgling startup called Christopher Ward. And that ultimately led us in 2008 to a sole supplier relationship, back to big relationship, de-risk relationships with Synergy Horloger, which was owned by Jörg Bader. Moving on 6 years, we then into 2014, we merged with Synergy Horloger. Yeah, so we became one entity, because my dream had always been to create this vertical watch brand. And I still today think to some extent we're arguably, and this seems remarkable, but arguably we are one of, if not the most vertical watch brand in the world, because we are completely connected with every one of our customers. Yeah. So we go from the customer all the way back to the watchmaker and the watch designer. Yeah. And that's even in the large groups, even in the large, much bigger brands and much more famous brands than ours, isn't always the case, because the industry, as you will know, is largely a wholesale-based industry. Yes, there are big moves afoot to, everybody now is piling online as fast as they possibly can, mono boutiques, etc. All of this is a big trend, but still in all, 75% even of those brands, their business is going through third parties. So it's quite unusual to have this vertical operation. But that was the dream, and that's why I wanted us to merge with Synergy. And that is ultimately, in its own way, that sort of power of the combo, if you like, real genuine watchmaking expertise on the one hand, and some retail marketing nous on the other, product understanding, that combination, ultimately with a lot of blood, sweat, tears and cock-ups along the way, has led to ultimately to something called the Bel Canto. So I don't think it is completely an accident, but believe me, it's not a straight line.
Well, a lot of the things that you were describing about the struggling businesses that you worked with before, in terms of supply chain, in terms of owning something with great reputation but not understanding why, I see huge parallels between that and the watch industry as a whole. And what you've described as a process of creating trust and efficiency in a supply chain, that makes the Bel Canto, from what I know about it, make a lot more sense. So it's really interesting to hear you describing that process to getting there, and how you basically built a career out of doing that, out of making better efficiency for better product in an industry. Before we do move on to the Bel Canto specifically, I'd like to ask you, because I don't actually know, who is Christopher Ward?
Oh, he does exist. It's not a made-up name. I mean, Chris was an old friend and colleague of mine, and as I said earlier, when after we'd sold ELC and we were pondering our next move, Chris and I had met up again, and he had a small clothing import business at the time. Wasn't completely motivated to carry on with it. Was quite interested in working with me again. I can't think for the life of me why. We were on a, literally, we've told this story before, and it turns out it is true. It's not just an invention. We were sailing gently down the Thames on a boat, talking about, why don't we do something together, and what might it be? And that's when the sort of the idea of A, doing something together, and B, watches came into the frame. Back to, well, it's got to be something we want to do. And I was certainly headed towards the online route. Chris had not been involved in online before. So he decided to throw his hand in with us, and effectively Peter and I bankrolled the business. And the original idea is that we would be the wise old owls, occasionally turning up and sprinkling pixie dust over this operation, whilst Chris did all the work. Didn't quite transpire that way, and we ended up I ended up spending sort of 24/7 365 working on Christopher Ward, and Chris was fantastic for us in the early days. He did a load of work. We traveled the world and Switzerland together. He was heavily involved. He's called Christopher Ward. The naming, always startups, the greatest fun is always finding a name. I was a big fan, and Peter was a big fan of IWC watches. We had this idea that we'd call ourselves MPC, Mike, Pete and Chris.
That's a TVR name, if ever I've heard one.
That was understandably ditched early on. Then it was going to be, this was a really weird one. My wife's maiden name is Fennell. Peter's wife's maiden name is Worswick. So we thought, I know, let's call it Fennell and Worswick. But we thought, well, no, if Charles Dickens was going to have a watch brand, he'd probably call it Fennell and Worswick.
Yeah, I think there's already a scented candle company called that as well.
It does sound like one, doesn't it? What a good idea. Maybe I'll suggest that to my wife. So we couldn't find the name we wanted, and we wanted it to be real. We didn't want a made-up name. We wanted it to have some resonance, and also we had this idea that we wanted it to be much more English than just British. And Christopher Ward, it occurred to me, rather than Chris, he's too modest to have suggested it himself. Certainly Michael France doesn't quite work for an English watch brand. Peter Ellis, well, it's a little sort of prosaic. Sorry again, Peter, that's twice he's going to kill me. But Christopher Ward has a really nice scan to it and sounds incredibly English. And so that's what we decided to call it, for better or ill. And so it still is.
And is Mr. Ward still part of the business, or is he out on a beach in Barbados thinking about his next project?
I don't know. He's out. I don't know. He's out on a beach in Barbados. No, he left the business about 3.5 years ago, and for a number of years, his involvement had been sort of waning, and it was just the right time for him to leave, and so he went on his merry way.
Fair enough. I'm quite interested as well, and I do promise we will talk about the Bel Canto, about the change to the logo, because I really like the new logo. I think it's been well received, and especially on the Bel Canto, no logo on the front and the logo on the crown.
Yeah.
Has there been a sense of thinking about moving away from the name Christopher Ward, or at least just in a visual term? And what is the thinking behind that?
Yes and no is the answer to that. Back in 2015, we instigated a review of the branding of the business.
Yeah.
The branding agency that we employed, who we still work with, they came up with a suggestion at the time that we thought was brilliant, that we shouldn't have anything other than the logo on i.e. the twin flags. They came up with this idea of the twin flags, which is what the logo is, so representing the English flag of St. George and the Swiss flag put together. And we thought that was brilliant because it's unusual. It's different. It's not what's done. This is originally, if I go back to 2005, when I employed the design company I used at Early Learning Centre to help design the first watches. so they'd moved from Etch-a-Sketch to watches. Honestly, when I think back,
they're very readable.
It was brilliant. Oh, brilliant! It was. They loved it. We had some great fun. The only thing we didn't know at the time is that the movement dictated the design of what you could put on the dial. We were just putting subdials all over the place, not realizing that we'd need to invest about 50 million just to create the movements that would enable us to have the designs that we wanted. Anyway, that's another story. And the original idea we had was to put nothing on the dial at all. Nothing, no name, nothing.
Yeah.
But we thought, I got talked out of that. I thought that was a bit risky. Anyway, but back in 2015, the agency we used, a company called Hello, were based in Somerset. Lovely team of people. Mainly ex-Londoners, moved down to the West Country, change of lifestyle, all that sort of stuff. But really talented. They came up with the Twin Flags logo, and the original suggestion was, why don't we just put this on the dials? Yes, love it. Showed it, as you do, to the legal team, our lawyers, and they said, yeah, tricky one that. There's a little known business called Swatch in watches, who have about 38 law firms around the world just dedicated to tripping up watch brands who dare to do anything that might infringe their copyright. And they said, look, in our view, the Twin Flags won't infringe. Yeah, you'll win any case, but you'll need, if they do come after you, and they were thinking TISO, if they do come after you, then you are going to end up spending half of your life invested in trying to fight this case. It'll cost you money you probably won't want to spend, and therefore our advice to you is, don't put just the logo on the dial. Put the name and the logo on the crown. Yeah, and after 5 years, you'll have usage rights. And if nobody's come after you, then you're safe and you're home and free. So that 5 years after we launched the new branding, we then decided, right, we can go back to plan A. And so last year, with the introduction of the Sealanders, which was a new platform that we introduced in 21, we were able to, for the first time, introduce our new Twin Flags only logo, which, as you say, has certainly gone down. I mean, by the way, I keep reminding people, because I counted it up, Rolex have changed their logo 28 times in their history. We have changed ours 3 times in 17 years. But my goodness, there's more copy written about Christopher Ward's logo than almost anything else in the free world. People are absolutely fascinated by logos, and great that they are, in actual fact. And we've been panned for previous logos. Some people have loved them. But the overwhelming majority of people seem to really connect with the Twin Flags logo. And I'm pleased to report that all new lines since the Sealander have all been introduced with the Twin Flags logo. But we're obviously going through the rest of the collection and changing on the run, as it were. And every time we do that, we get about a 20% step up in sales just for changing the logo.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, for me, the old logo is reminiscent of some of the brands that have popped up that are very affordable, like Daniel Wellington. Yeah. The new logo takes away any kind of association, and it feels to me more confident, especially because it's very hard to Google.
That is true. Yeah.
But I very much like it. And I think that timing works really, really nicely to finally talk about the Bel Canto, because that was logo free, logo on the crown. Yeah. And actually, to your point about it being the most conversed thing in the universe, I really think a lot of that is because Christopher Ward, yourself, the brand, makes itself very accessible and transparent to have that conversation at all. Whereas there's no point having the conversation about Rolex because it's a brick wall. You're not going to get it. It can only be speculation. So the fact that you're here talking to us about it is, I think, where that interest comes from, and where the excitement around the Bel Canto has really, really ignited. So let's talk about that. Bel Canto. When I saw the price, my immediate thought was, you are insane. You're going to... It will sell, but I don't see how you're going to make any profit from it. Where did this all come from?
Oh, it started almost now sort of 10 years ago with the jumping hour, I suppose. And at the time, our master watchmaker was a real sort of genius called Johannes Janker. Johannes is the guy who designed our own in-house movement, the Caliber SH21, which were later on, well, not this year, but in the autumn of 23, we'll be launching the 2.0 version of Caliber SH21. But he created this jumping hour module, which sat above a SW200. It's a really clever piece of work, and I often find that, and this is way beyond my pay grade. I'm not an engineer, and I'm in awe of people who have that sort of ability to think three-dimensionally in terms of how things can work and how they can simplify. And often it's the simplified way that is the most effective way of doing things. So taking an SW200, building a module on top of it that created the most accurate, and we haven't sold this well enough at all, it's the most accurate jumping hour in the world. And this is a man, and Johannes, who does nothing by halves. We have a moon phase watch, for God's sake. That is one of the very few perpetual moon phases in existence, in that it...
I didn't know that.
I know. And again, it's my fault, because we haven't done a good enough job. This is a perpetual moon phase that if the watch is kept fully wound, it will track perfectly the phases of the moon in real time for 128 years.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah? It is quite an incredible thing. One of the interesting, one of the curiosities that has occurred with the publicity around the Bel Canto is that people are looking again at some of these products of ours that have been there for a long time, and we've had huge step up in sales on them, because I think people are realizing that the Bel Canto is not just something that popped out of a hat like a rabbit. It's the culmination of a lot of things that have gone over a long period of time. Mm-hmm. But in the Bel Canto's specific case, Frank Stelzer, who I know I think you've spoken with,
yes,
Andrew, yeah. Frank, who worked alongside Johannes, helping to create Caliber SH21 and all these other wonderful modules. Frank himself is an incredible engineer. I mean, really humble man, but an incredible brain. And one of those in the bath moments, I think he realized in a flash of inspiration that it should be possible to translate the jumping hour module into a watch that had a chime attached to it. Yeah, he could turn that into a chiming watch by changing a number of wheels, a number of things in the movement, in the module that was created originally by Johannes and him. And that was the sort of the spark that then led to, well, if we're going to do a chiming watch, and the first one we did, because we make all of Meistersinger's watches for them, and we created the Bel Aura for them. So the first time we used the this new module, FS01, as we've now called it, in honor of Frank, it went into the Bel Aura, which was a wonderful watch. I think it's a brilliant watch, but it's covered over by, as most of these are, by a classic Meistersinger dial. And actually the module itself underneath, because it was going to be covered by a dial, didn't need to be aesthetically pleasing. The team of designers we've got here are not, they're pretty determined people, and they have very high standards. And so the idea was, look, why don't we do something little out of the ordinary, certainly for, say, us, and we'll show all of the key elements of a chiming watch above the platine. Yes, great idea. Love that idea. Sketches. Yeah, that's fantastic. What do you think, Frank? I don't know what the German is for expletives, but suddenly we've given Frank a huge headache because everything had to change, and then you're into a process that took months and months and months and months, if not years. Where every aspect of the aesthetics, to improve the aesthetics, and that was always the thing that we wanted to get right, led to an engineering solution or problem that then led to a solution. And so it was this iterative process of a wonderful original idea by Johannes that was then developed much further by Frank, which was then taken to a different level by the design team, who I think did an absolutely outstanding job. And then you've got the involvement of some of the very top level watchmaking companies and suppliers of movements and parts of movements in the industry in Switzerland involved in the creation of this watch. And they're used to doing, they're certainly not used to working with the likes of Christopher Ward, although we've worked with them before on things like the C60 concept, which we brought out last year. And we've had a long relationship with Armin Strom, whose atelier, and if you've never been to their atelier, although they're moving in February to a new premises, but their atelier, which is exactly 7 minutes walk away from ours in Biel, is the most incredible place to go to if you've never been. Speak to Claude.
I have been, and I heard the story about how they managed to purchase all that CNC machinery cheap during the recession.
Yeah, exactly.
They've been a real inspiration and a growth in the industry, kind of almost passing the benefit that they received along, which is just. You were talking earlier, this is why those parallels are coming in, you were talking earlier about finding relationships between businesses to work together to create a security for everyone to be uplifted rather than working apart. And yourself and Armin Strom working together, and Armin Strom working with other brands like Haraj, I think.
Yes, indeed.
Is a really great example of that for me.
I agree, and none of this. The Bel Canto could not. It's not the idea of one person. It's not me. It's not. It's a lot of people coming together, all with an absolute dedication to deliver the best they can. And we're lucky enough in this instance that effort has led to something that has the potential, literally, to be quite transformational for us, and maybe transformational for some other businesses involved as well, because the reaction to the Bel Canto has been quite staggering.
Well, you say that with great humbleness, might be transformative. For me, it is an absolute game changer, because it brings something that should be 3-4 times the cost to an affordable audience. We spoke about some of the detail of how it's produced and how that was achieved in our previous review video. So dear viewer and listener, if you want to see that, you can check that out over on our channel, link in the description. But what really fascinated me, and what I didn't communicate so much, was the people side of this process. When I came in a few months before the launch and we spoke about it, you were hesitant about the potential success of the watch.
Well, we thought we had a good watch on our hand. We knew it was a lovely watch, but I never ever assume that things are going to be as successful as sometimes they turn out. I mean, you just never know until you put something in front of the people who really matter. And with respect, that's not even you, Andrew. Well, I'm
Mr. Slot, so no, I don't count, unfortunately.
It's the customers.
You can't afford one.
It's those customers. They will make or break anything. And yes, we thought we had something really good on our hands. But what surprised us was the level of response. And in fairness, to be honest, and this is where we do owe some thanks to you, Andrew, and others, who immediately did see that this was something different, that might even be something special, and were prepared to say that. And because you have, incredibly, people who listen to your podcasts.
We don't get it either, to be honest.
The word got around. And so it wasn't just us saying, this is a good watch. A lot of people who are respected in the industry said similar things. And so it just seemed to have a groundswell. I mean, I've been involved in, over the course of my career, I've seen this happen maybe no more than half a dozen times to this level. It's a chemical reaction that nobody literally can ever predict. You just don't know. And there's a bit of luck attached to it as well. There always is. You always need a bit of luck, But it's the culmination. If good people are doing good things, eventually I'm a real believer that something special can occur. It doesn't always happen like that, and it often takes longer than you want it to take. But actually, we've got some really, not just within Christopher Ward, but some really great people involved in this watch. And as described earlier, it's not just a sort of a one-off. There's a thread that goes through a number of years that then leads to this chemical reaction that you then can't really expect, but you've got to recognize it when it happens. And that's the stage we're at now, where there's a recognition that this is, there's a tiger here. Now let's grab hold of the tail and let's see where that tiger takes us, because it is a very important watch for us, certainly.
Not to diminish the success of Christopher Ward in and of itself, but it almost feels like, from what you've said, that's a proof of concept at a lower level for what could be achieved, and the Bel Canto is the first real expression of what happens if we push this, we turn this up to 11. I was especially surprised by the reaction when I spoke to the design team. The watch came out and it was gone in a couple of hours.
Yeah.
I passed my congratulations, and the response I got back was really one of shock and just fear of the unknown. What does this mean now? We expected to sell 300 with another 300 next year. We had to bring that 300 forwards, and now we've got somewhere in the region of 10 times as much interest as we expected, and we're in a little bit of a panic as to what to do with it. How do you cope with that? What do you do?
Well, you cope with it by, to be honest, being quite cold. And this is my approach to these things anyway.
Hence the holiday in Barbados afterwards, I think.
Absolutely.
Warm back up again.
So it's like you have to then assess the situation quite calmly, carefully, work through what can be done. Do you want to chase the tiger? Do you want to let this happen? That's a big decision in the first instance. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes, we do, is the answer. Okay, how do we make that happen then? In the first instance, how do we multiply the potential number of watches we can create here in a relatively short period of time very significantly? Well, that's a process of conversations that have been taking place between us and our supply partners, etc., etc. And we think we now have the solution. And so, during the course of 23, we will be producing a significant number of series Bel Cantos. Obviously, the limited edition blue and the greens, they're limited, that's gone. But there are a number of really superb colours that we had always been interested in thinking about, and actually were considered even for the first two. And we'll make those open series, a number of additional colours, and we will promise to deliver those people who've already registered interest in Bel Canto beyond the 600 we've been able to support. I've already written to those people and told them that we have the opportunity, if they're still interested in enabling them to own a Bel Canto before Christmas 23. And you won't believe the response has been absolutely astonishing. So I would suggest 90% of those people who registered are pretty much signed up now for a Bel Canto at some period from the middle of the year through to the end of the year. And we're working through so the ramping up of the production is in train in terms of the planning of it. Then beyond that, what this has created is, as you rightly say, it's we're never going to not. People have been writing to me saying, well, why don't you just drop everything else? Why don't you just do this sort of stuff? That's not what we want to do at all. So we're building, I think, carefully. Others, will have their own views, but we're trying to very carefully construct a number of key platforms of watches in the business that genuinely give access to really top-level horology from a price point of around, let's say, the 600 or 700 pounds mark, all the way up to that sort of 3 and maybe slightly above mark in the future. And at each level, then that brings many people into mechanical watches for the very first time. And we're talking, really well produced mechanical watches, because it doesn't matter to us whether it's a Bel Canto or it's a Sealander, which opens at sort of £635. The level of finishing and care and attention that we try and apply to every single watch is the thing that I believe, rightly or wrongly, separates us from other value watch brands. Because there are lots of other value watch brands out there, and credit to them, and fantastic job they're doing as well. What we try and do is not compromise on the quality and the finishing, and therefore we genuinely believe, and I will honestly, I've offered this on several occasions in the past, if somebody can bring me an equivalent watch at the same sort of price level of an equivalent quality, you can have the watch for nothing. And nobody has ever taken us up on that, because when you literally have one of our watches in your hand on your wrist and compare it to an equivalent price watch, and you know what you're looking for, you know that you're looking at the transitions on a case, which make all the beauty of the transition, the level of brushing, the polishing level, the detailing. It's, if you look carefully, then you see the difference. Now, many people won't ever see the difference, But I love the fact that Patek, for instance, polish the underside of their dials. Nobody's ever going to see that. But they do it anyway. And I just, that's attention. That matters to them. It matters to them. And that's what I like to think, maybe misguidedly, but genuinely do wholly believe that that's what separates us from the herd.
But you sounded still yet surprised that the people who had registered an interest in the Bel Canto, when they were told that they would be able to get one before Christmas next year, you were still surprised by that. I've held one of those things. It's amazing.
I mean, surprised, delighted. It's a privilege. I mean, and it's just most of us, and I'm sure you're the same, we don't take compliments well.
We're very British, aren't we?
We're very British about it, and so you never know when the next, I don't want to be a hostage to fortune here, but the team deserve the credit, because they have, I know the amount of time, effort, argument, frustration, pain that they went through to deliver this, and that's what makes it special for us. And the fact that they are surprised when you say that they were surprised when you spoke, I love that, because it keeps them humble as well. They're humble. They're not arrogant. And the best work is done, in my view, by people who are humble, not I'm a Lionel Messi man rather than a Cristiano Ronaldo man.
I have no idea about football. I know that is football, but I don't know. I'm sure our listeners will understand. I have no idea.
Some of them, I'm sure, will. It's very pertinent right at the moment, I think.
But perhaps some of the horror from the team as well was the realization that, you've had some good singles with some of the entry-level Christopher Ward stuff. This has been your breakthrough album. There's going to be a tricky second album.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a while off because these things, as you know, Andrew, take some time. But my goodness, we've got some great EPs coming out in the interim. One I was were testing in Barbados, actually, which is I played back to the design team yesterday. I think it's an absolutely wonderful piece, and we'll be launching that in May. But if you like, the more natural follow-on for the Bel Canto is we have the idea, we know what we want to do, and we're now at that beginning phase of just turning that into sort of aesthetics and all the rest of it before we give Frank another nervous breakdown.
I'd ask for a teaser of any kind, but I doubt I'm going to get one.
No, you wouldn't want me to spoil the surprise.
No, that's fair enough. And to be honest, I'm still reveling in the fact that I will be able to get a Bel Canto because in making the video, stuff like that, I forgot to register. It like the actual launch just slipped past and it was too late, so I missed one.
Oh, is that right?
So and in no way am I going to use any kind of position of power to try and get ahead of the other people who did get there, but I very much look forward to a series being available so I can purchase one as a good boy customer.
No, absolutely, Andrew. And knowing that, I'll pass that on to the team. We'll need to make sure that you
don't do that. I will register. In fact, I'm going to do it now because I probably should
do it now. Yeah, do it now, and then you'll get an email from me.
I'm so terrible for that. I missed Max Booser's Mad One for exactly the same reason. So embroiled in the thick of what was happening, the part of me that likes and buys watches was just left behind.
I know, it's but so they did go quickly though, so don't beat yourself up too much.
Well, I have to say as well, you've given us credit for getting the word out there, but I think our video came out after they were all sold out anyway. They were gone so quickly.
It did, but I think they in hours. The first one, the blue, was a sluggish sale. That took 7.5 hours. The green went in 2.
Wow.
It was just remarkable.
And how many people can you say do you currently have registered in interest for one? And you can add one more to that because I have just signed up.
Well, put it this way: we're talking 5 figures now.
Wow.
Okay. I'm not going to get one before Christmas next year, am I? I'll get one at some point.
You might. But you need to. If you haven't registered, as you've just said you're going to, you'll need to register quickly.
I have literally just registered, so
yeah, good.
I have a name in there. So your estimation of 600 units max over the course of 6 months has become a much bigger number, way beyond the scale of what you expected. You mentioned that you work with suppliers as well. I assume you've had a conversation with them. You picked up the phone and said, "Oh, hi, we need to slightly change our business model here." How did that even go down?
Really, really well.
Is that a lie?
That sounded like a lie.
No. Well, no. Like us, they had to recalibrate. Yeah, so they themselves had to think differently. But also it offers huge opportunities for them as well, because you know some of these people very well. They're not used to talking these numbers. Even the 600 was a big order.
Okay.
Yeah. When you multiply that by several times, it's a challenging prospect, but it also has the opportunity of being quite transformative for them as well in some ways. Machine use. If you're investing in very expensive CNC machines, which they are and they do, and you're moving to new premises, which say in Armin Strom's case they most certainly are, then this sort of volume can do much to offset some of the risk and cost associated with that, because you're getting, you're maximizing machine usage time. You have less downtime, so the payback on your investment can be radically improved. So of course it's of great interest, but it's these are numbers that are not typical in this world of the type of watch that we've done. We talk about Moser, we talk about MB&F, amazing timepieces, but relatively small numbers.
Yeah.
So the thing that we're doing here hasn't been done that often, and so it's a challenge, and it has yet to be delivered. It has yet to be. We've yet to deliver it. But if you're if you're working with smart, talented, committed people, and you genuinely believe in partnership and not just the word, but you're engaged with each other to try and resolve problems. I'm an absolute believer that it's not, rather than did you hear my Bel Canto go off then? It's 11 o'clock.
You managed to get one.
Yeah, I managed to get one, fortunately. I'm not as slow on the button as Andrew clearly is. So I registered very early. As I say, when you've got a team of committed, talented people, it's a problem that just needs a solution. But we have to work through it very carefully. But the prize here for everybody involved is sizable. So it gets people's attention. It certainly got my attention, it is doable, we believe, But the fact that nobody's done it before to this level is not going to be a cakewalk.
Given the situation in the industry at the moment with wait lists and the cynicism that sits around that, I can understand that different people have viewed this launch in different ways. But talking to you about the impact that it has not just on Christopher Ward but on the suppliers as well, I would hope that people see the transparency there for one, but also how transformative this is, as you say, up and down the entire chain. The benefit for us as the end customer, but also the different people along the way who usually sit in the shadows in these kinds of conversations. Yeah. The only people who don't benefit from it are the people who are profiteering from the mystique around the big margins in the Swiss watch industry, right?
You could say that. I mean, it's not. It really isn't for me to cast aspersions on the way anybody else runs their business. I, like you and like many other people involved in the industry, are surprised at the tactics that seem to be deployed by some brands. There is no need, in my view, for there to be these sorts of shortages. So they are largely, it seems, manufactured. I'm not in. I don't get it. I've never got it. Our job, and this is just simple because is to fulfil the demand. That's just as simple as that. And if we can find a way of doing that, why wouldn't we want to do it? I do not buy into this red velvet rope luxury approach that looks to make scarcity almost the sort of prime motive of keeping prices high, because I do think over time, and it may take a generation or more, but I do think we witness and see every day changes in the way people view what really matters to them. Luxury is changing. Yeah, luxury is literally changing in the world around us, and there is, it's an old cliche, but time is the greatest luxury. We're very fortunate to be involved in an industry that measures that, and it's never good because you can never get it back. But actually, the thing about the watch industry that we all of those connected with it find, I'm still in awe of watchmaking at its finest. It's awesome. I don't think mankind has yet to produce a precision mechanical instrument better than the mechanical watch. This is the apex of our development as human beings in many ways, mechanically. That's an incredible thing to be having on your wrist. And why wouldn't we want as many people as possible to literally have that almost visceral pleasure of owning and understanding how precious that is? And that's what originally drove the plan for Christopher Ward. It's what drives us today. It's why we look to keep the price as accessible as possible, but on the other hand, not compromise, because you can always price is the last thing that we think about. Honestly, that sounds ridiculous. But we have a simple model. We mark up by 3 times, not by 12 times, not by 15 times. And so whatever product we produce, the value is literally the same. Yeah, it doesn't matter whether we're selling it at £700 or £4,000, the value is the same. And in some cases, our higher price watches, because, take the Bel Canto, we've probably underpriced or slightly, not massively, because the cost of the polishing on some of the bridges has led to maybe, and our absolute determination to have absolutely perfection means that we reject quite a few. Yeah. Well, that goes into the costing. Yeah. Well, the rejected ones. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll just have one.
So actually, some of our more something like the Bel Canto is probably slightly less than 3 times markup. So it's probably one of our better. The same was true of the C60 Concept last year.
Yeah.
These are our better value watches. It sounds ridiculous, but it's true.
Yeah.
And I think people, when you see them and wear them, you kind of understand it. It's real.
Yeah. My immediate first impression of seeing it in pictures was, I don't think this will hold up in person. And when it did hold up in person better, my immediate thought was, I don't see how this is profitable. But again, talking to your team, they've used some very clever ways to make that happen.
Yeah.
But in terms of your passion, if anyone by this point is still doubting the genuine nature of your passion, it's not just within Christopher Ward that you are expressing this desire to make the industry more inclusive, because you're also involved with British Watch and Clockmakers Alliance as well, aren't you?
I am, yeah. Well, Roger Smith and I set it up, yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that and what you're trying to achieve.
Well, it came about. I'd known Roger for a while. I mean, again, he'll be embarrassed. He's actually coming here tomorrow, but he'll be embarrassed. But again, you'd look at what he does, and and yet a more humble, straightforward man you couldn't wish to meet. And yet it's incredible what he does. And because I think maybe because we're both sort of northern lads and from different disciplines, I'm in awe of him. He will tell you he's not a great marketeer and all the rest of it. So we connected years ago, and we had an interest in the industry in this country, but we bumped into each other walking around the very last Salon QP, which I think was in 2018, and we bumped into each other and we cast it. It was an awful show. it was just dreadful, and it felt so depressing. And we said, look, and what we knew, he and I, was there was some really good stuff going on in this country for a start.
Yeah.
But if this was the expression of it, then it ain't gonna get any better. So we decided. I literally stood up at Salon QP on one of the floors. We decided, well, let's do something about it then. let's do something. Yeah,
Just start right now, kind of.
Yeah, exactly. So and we said, yeah, let's do it. Christ, went away. Wondered why we'd said it to each other. Then Roger very smartly introduced a chap called Alistair Audsley into the equation. Alistair's worked with Roger on a number of things over the years. Mm-hmm. Very smart guy. And we got together in the early part of 2019 and started working through what could we do. And we decided that there are lots of bodies, the watchmakers, there's the British Horological Institute. There are a number of bodies in Britain, all very worthwhile and very excellent in their own ways, but they're all kind of largely invested in the past rather than in growing the present and the future.
Yeah.
And there was no trade body. There's no representation of British watchmakers. It didn't even, when we first approached the government, they didn't even know there was still a sector in the UK. It didn't exist.
The British government out of touch? What are you saying?
I mean, astonishing, isn't it, really? So absolutely crazy. It must have been an off day. So they didn't even know that it existed. So we decided, well, the way forward was let's create the Alliance as a non-for-profit organisation dedicated to, firstly and most importantly, promoting British watch brands with a long-term view that says, wouldn't it be great if we could have more manufacturing of watches, componentry, movements in the UK. And the best way to do that, we felt, was to create this trade body. And so we set it up, and literally, talk about being surprised. I mean, we were really, I remember the three of us thinking, Christ, well, we've gone live now. Is anybody going to join us? And because you don't know, it's like, who that? I mean, Roger's, he's Roger Smith. I mean, who am I? We were absolutely astonished. I mean, there was clearly a need, and very quickly we had 60 people sign up as trade members. Mm-hmm. We started it's open to anybody, and students, students of horology can join free, and for a very small sum, anybody across the world can become a club member. And you get invited to special open dial sessions with the likes of the first one was done by Roger. I'm about to tomorrow shoot the video for the next open dial with Nicholas Bowman-Scargill of Fears. Mm-hmm. Chris Ward and Fears have come together on a collaborative venture to launch a watch of just 50 pieces, all of the profits of which will go towards the Alliance. Nicholas was a founding board member as well of the Alliance.
That's awesome.
So that is, and it's a fantastic watch, by the way. And genuinely, our design team and Nicholas worked on the design, but it'll have Fears on the dial, and Chris Ward on the back, where as well as the design, we're providing the movement, which will indeed be our jumping hour movement. So it's a very, very special watch.
Nice. I look forward to seeing that.
23rd of January it's released. And if you want to buy one, you have to join the Alliance. If you're not a member, can I suggest you join up immediately? Because I think they're going to. I think that, click more buttons. I think they're going to go very, very quickly like that. So we set it up, and then there was clearly this need, and now we have 76 members in total. One of the first things we did was commission the first ever bellwether report on the industry in this country.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen a copy. And we employed KPMG to do that on our behalf. And for the first time, there's a sense of how many brands there are in the UK, what their turnover is, how many people we're employing, what the mix is demographically, gender-wise, etc. And what are some of the barriers to expansion and growth that people feel are in the way of their businesses growing. And so, armed with that information, we are looking to, in the first instance, as I say, get the word out there that this industry exists. We want to bring in, Roger and I and Alistair and like yourselves, we fundamentally believe that now that the sector is acknowledged, the best way for it to grow is ultimately, and it'll take some time, is to bring talented people into it. Yeah. So if you were an engineer or a designer or a marketeer or a salesman today, and you're at university and you're doing a degree that's relevant, you're not going to even think about the watch industry because it doesn't really exist. Well, now it exists.
Yeah.
Now we're identifying that there are career paths for people all the way through, that it's an exciting industry to be involved with. It's got a fantastic history, but it can have a brilliant future. My own personal belief, and this is, I may be very wrong about this, but my own personal belief is that it's unlikely, certainly in my lifetime, it won't happen, but it may not be ever the case that we end up being a mirror of the Swiss industry. I think that horse may have bolted. Yeah. However, a bit like the automotive industry, where we in this country lead the way in terms of F1, and therefore we lead the way in terms of technical development that goes into the automotive industry. My own view is that the nature of both the entrepreneurship and the technical ability that this country can deliver, and that kind of can-do-ness when we're at our very best, you can do almost anything, in this country. I think we could end up having a watch sector that leads the world in technical advances. And, is even a single person, i.e. George Daniels, who for me is the greatest Briton of the last 100 years that virtually nobody knows about. George Daniels has probably created the most important development in watchmaking in the last 250 years, which was the coaxial escapement. Old man Hayek was smart enough ultimately, after Patek turned it down, to take it into Omega. Smart move on his part, because George spent years being rejected by all and sundry. Interestingly enough, Roger Smith himself has taken the coaxial to a new level. And that's a story that should be told, because he's doing some incredible things and has done incredible things with the coaxial escapement beyond anything that George did, and that's a story to be spun really hard, I think. And there are things that again Roger's involved with, but with the Manchester Institute of Technology. I think it's Manchester Metropolitan University actually, but where he's working on, and this, if this comes off, this would transform the world of mechanical engineering. I mean, he's working on a nano technology that, when applied to moving parts, will remove the need for lubrication. So what does that mean?
No more servicing.
Yeah, no more service. I know that may not be the best news for people involved in the servicing industry, but that's the level of technology that that's going on.
Yeah.
Now, it may or may not come to fruition. It's an amazing thing, but they're making progress.
Yeah.
They're the sorts of things that I think I get really excited about. And, that's where I think we can shine a light on some of the talent that is already in existence, but also bring in new talent into the industry. And it's people what make great things, people make great companies, people make great product, people will make a great British watch sector ultimately. And if we can bring the best and the brightest in because they can see a route to growth, personal growth and business growth, then the industry will have a fantastic future. And the good news is already there is an underlying number of really smart people involved in the British industry. There's some fantastic stuff going on out there. And the closer we've got to it, who knew, for instance, there were 90 brands in the UK,
Is there?
Yeah.
90?
Yeah. 75 of them are signed up already to the Alliance. It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. And so if you shine a light on stuff, if there's sunshine, there's growth. Yeah. And that's, in a nutshell, what the Alliance is about. We're just wanting to be the sun that shines a light and allows this incredible sector and the talented people that already exist here to really grow and promote the hell out of the British watch industry.
There's not a huge amount to be said on top of that. It's just a fantastic thing. And if the Bel Canto is anything to go on, the innovation and thinking that made that possible can be scaled up into an entire industry for a nation. And it just so happens that I know a person who is an engineer in F1 who is currently making his own watch.
Seriously?
I'm talking about you, Jonathan Blanco. Yes.
Wow.
So the hunger is there, the passion is there, the drive to do something different and break away from tradition to create mechanical watches that have a fresh and new excitement for a new generation is 100% there. Dear viewer and listener, if you want to get involved, go to britishwatchmakers.com, sign up. Let's make this thing blow up.
Tick to that.
Well, thank you so much, Mike. We've taken up a lot more of your time than we had originally intended, so apologies for that, but thank you so much for sharing. Absolutely fascinating.
Thank you. And really enjoyable talking to you guys as well. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. If you would like us, dear viewer and listener, to have a further conversation with Mike, perhaps you've got some questions that you would like to ask, pop those down in the comments below. He seems to know a lot about the industry and is quite willing to talk about it, so let's see what we can get out of him next time. Thank you so much, Mike. It's been fascinating and an utter privilege to talk to you and be a small part in the Bel Canto experience. Thank you, dear viewer and listener, for listening. Please do like, comment, subscribe. Click all the links in the description below, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.